Hi, I'm Paul LaFontaine, Quantified Self experimenter, and on this video I'm going to talk about an experiment I did on reducing stress reactions. Do you know when you walk down the street and a car actually runs through a stop sign and almost hits you, that reaction that you have? That's a stress reaction. How about when someone says something to you that makes you a little bit upset? That's a stress reaction. I wanted to log my stress reactions and find out if I could have them reduced by simply understanding where they came from. I used an app called TapLog. TapLog allows you to create your own buttons, your own categories, as well as numeric values associated with it. So with TapLog, when you actually enter a button, it will then log it at a time of day with the different characteristics, be it category or amount that you want to capture, and most importantly, you could then export that to Excel and to begin to play with the data. I did this for 33 weeks and I logged 723 different stress reactions. I triggered the stress reactions in one of two ways. First of all, if I felt it in my body, I would call that a stress reaction. I would log it, so if I was angry or feeling anxious. Second of all, if I had a thought that was recurring. For instance, if I needed to mail an envelope and I just kept thinking it, I considered that a stress reaction and I would log that. Let's look at the log volume. The log volume over time actually began at around 6 to 8 logs per day and then dropped down to 1 or 2 per day by the end of the study, with an average of 3.3 per day, but you can see a clear drop in volume over time. My qualitative experience was that I was experiencing less stress over time and therefore logging fewer upset reactions. I do have to take into account, however, that there was some bias, and that in fact over time I would tend to notice these upset events, but I wouldn't log them. So although the number of stress events did drop clearly, we do have to take into account that there was some sense of exhaustion with doing the study. The triggers in total, if we look at the categories, 26% were coworkers, which is not surprising since I spend so much time at work. 24% were actually judging my own performance. Was I doing well or not? 14% was health related. That could be anywhere from, was I working out enough? Was I gaining weight? Or if I had a toothache during the period and I was worried about the toothache being more than just a toothache. During the period of the study, I actually traveled full-time for work, so 11% of my stress reactions were around travel. And these were things like getting to the airport on time, was my flight going to be delayed, etc. So those four categories represented 75% of my upset reactions over the period. Because coworkers was the largest category, I wanted to dig into that a little bit deeper. And so in Quantified Self, we always go right to the numbers. So I thought it would be interesting to test my hypothesis. I thought that my coworkers would upset me through some interaction, and I wanted to work on my reaction to that. So I looked at the coworker reactions, the coworker upset reactions by hour, and this was how it broke out. The red box represents the workday hours. The blue bars represent the number of logged events. I would have expected that the number of blue events would be larger in the middle of the day, but in fact it was early in the day from 6 in the morning to 9 in the morning prior to me going to work when I was having the most upset logs. In the evening there was actually very few. So what I found when I looked at the data was I was actually the source of the upsets. I was actually gearing up for a day in the morning and I was getting myself upset prior to going to work. A next category was travel. I knew I traveled a lot and it was a source of significant stress, and so I purposely looked at different events that would happen around travel. Let's have a look at the data. You can see here the trend on travel, the red line being the number of trips I took. The bump in July was due to holiday travel. You see here in the blue line was the amount of upsets that I logged, a clear drop in the number of upsets over time. This was because I was actually actively looking at specific things that upset me, like was the plane going to be late? Was I not going to be able to get on the flight? Was I not going to get a seat? These were all things that I was upsetting my best self about. I realized that, like my coworkers, I was upsetting myself about travel because in fact most of the time I got on the plane no problem and most of the time I had a seat. So in fact I was creating these upsets, and as I looked at them they began to go away. Because this is Quantified Self, I wanted to go deeper into the data. I'd seen with my coworkers and with my travel there were events that occurred very specifically in the moment, and these were direct actions, they were direct reactions to things that were happening. But I also saw that I was quite a few times self-inducing my stress, sitting at night at 10 o'clock thinking about a coworker, or sitting in a taxi thinking about the flight. There was nothing in my immediate surroundings that actually caused the stress, but I was still becoming stressed by inducing it on myself. So I went back to my calendar and I looked at all the dates and then compared that to the logs. And if something occurred on my calendar that indicated that my stress was created in that moment, for instance, if I had a meeting at 10 and then I logged something at 10:15, I call that a direct. That means I met with Joe and I reacted to Joe. Or if I logged something like a car almost hit me, that was clearly a direct. But when there were things that were clearly not happening to me in the moment, like thinking about Joe at 10 o'clock at night, I called them self-induced and created those two categories. I wanted to see how much was I creating my own stress and how much was actually happening in the world around me. And here's what I found. 77% of my stress was self-induced. In those cases, I was sitting in a calm, quiet environment and I was thinking about something completely different. I was completely in another circumstance inside my own head. Only 23% of the time was I actually reacting something in real time. So my original hypothesis was I wanted to actually improve my reactions to things around me, but only 23% of the time were things actually happening around me. This surprised me quite a bit. Now I wanted to go back to the data and I wanted to see, by actually looking at the things that upset me over the period of 33 weeks, how did it affect the direct and how did it affect these self-induced stressors? Here's what I found. Over the period of this experiment, those stress reactions that were as a result of things happening around me, or the direct, which was 23% of my stressors, remained relatively flat. I was continuing to react to the things around me in a way that was consistent with what it was at the beginning. What was dropping were the self-induced. I was actually learning indirectly how to no longer be in my head at 10 o'clock at night or sit in a taxi and worry about the flight. The self-induced clearly dropped over time. The results I expected at the beginning of the experiment was that my reactions to things around me would soften over time, would actually change, but that's not what I found. What I found was by logging my reactions and looking at what was stressing me out, I actually learned to no longer induce my own stress. Sit in the evening and just create things that were wrong, or actually sit in a taxi and worry as I went to the airport. The net result was qualitatively my life did get better, and that's a great outcome, and that's what Quantified Self is all about. For more information on Quantified Self, follow me at QuantSelfLafont. And also, if you'd like to see my experiments, please check out my blog at quantselflafont.com. Thank you.